Hello, hello. What's going on, everybody? Thank you for listening to USB Unaffiliated Sports Broadcast. Thank you for being here today. I hope everybody got the advertising and joins us in the chat here. I think it's going to be a good one. So we don't have a guest. Okay, I know we've had quite a bit of guests recently. Wasn't able to get one lined up, and honestly, there's really, I don't think, a good need for it just yet. As we get a little bit closer to everything that's going to be going on, at that point, I want to bring in some more players, but I got to reach out to them and make sure that everything is good with that and that they're willing to do it for one. I mean, that's a big part of it, right? But 1 second here, just trying to make sure all these systems are working. If anybody's in the chat, please just let me know if there's any sound issues or anything like that. But yeah, so no guest today, but what we are going to do is we're going to get into our football coverage. Okay, so I'm excited for football. I hope you're excited for football. A lot of people, they really like the weather, which today it's super hot. It's super hot. So I hope you're drinking water. Definitely hope you're drinking water because, again, it's super hot and yeah. Stay hydrated for sure. But me, I'm a fan of the cooler temperatures. All right, I really like the fall season. I don't know, it just speaks to my soul. So I'm super excited for football. Super excited to see what our teams have to do. And we also have a new school joining our community. So we're really excited to be able to give them a shout out. Yeah, I mean, it's been a long time coming. I think a lot of people have been anticipating it, but we're super excited to have them enter in and probably a lot of familiar faces, and it's going to be a good time. I think having 4 schools out here in the Tooele County area battling back and forth, I think that's pretty awesome. So it's going to be a good time. Again, if anybody can, please head over to the chat and just let me know if there's any issues. Just want to make sure that everybody's getting a good experience. So without further ado, let's just kind of jump into it. So the new school we got introduced, the Deseret Peak Golden Eagles. All right. So they're their newest addition to the USB coverage here. And now, being a Dallas Cowboys fan myself, I don't usually root for anything with the name Eagles in it. However, I'll make an exception for them, okay? And don't judge me. I was 7 when I became a fan, and they were actually winning things back then. So all you Chiefs fans out there, you'll understand soon enough. Now, waiting on the roster to know what players have switched, because that's a big part of this component as well, right? We know that there's some players that are from our other 3 schools that are going to be playing there. So we got to wait on the roster to be posted to see who that might be, but I'm expecting to see some familiar names as, again, they'll have players joining from all 3 of our previous schools. So I imagine we will have a better idea of who to look out for as the time gets nearer. But as of right now, we're going to just go ahead with what we have, which isn't a whole lot, but we do know that their head coach is Cooper Buckhammer, and I hope that I said that correctly. And honestly, not a lot is known about him personally, but one of his assistant coaches did stand out to me. One Heath Kelly, he did some work down here in Grantsville. He was a really great coach to my son, and he does a fantastic job in my opinion. So my optimism's pretty high for him. I think they're going to be in some good hands. Again, I don't know anything about the head coach, okay, but I do think that if you surround yourself with good people, even if you have your own shortcomings, hey, things will work out. And I really do believe that. So again, and I'm not saying he does, I don't know anything about him, right? But what we do know is their schedule. So let's kind of get into their opening matchup, and we'll continue on with the other schools as we go along. Guys, I am really hoping to get some people in the chat. I want to know what you guys think about, where these teams might end up, who you're looking forward to. I will do my best to interact with the chat as much as possible. So please feel free to head over there and definitely, get involved with that, because again, I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to make people calling in work on this. I'm still kind of working on that. But I kind of want to do some of these open forum discussions where people maybe have the opportunity to call in and shout out their team, their players, just kind of discuss the sport of the day that we're talking about. You know what I mean? So with that, let's just kind of get into it, though. So we do know that they start their season on August 15th, and they'll be at home facing Box Elder. Now, last year, Box Elder went 4-7 overall and 2-5 in region. Box Elder didn't have a lot of stats listed, so it's kind of tough to get a feel for who we should be looking out for or watching out for without watching the film, right? But for the 3 games that they did have stats for, it looked like they had about an 80-20 split on their play calls, favoring the run. It looked like the quarterback was the primary rusher in those games as well. So, however, he was a senior, and the only other quarterback on the stat sheet was soon-to-be junior, number 14, Caden Reyes. He was 0 for 3 in the games listed, and I'm not sure what that might look like for them moving into this matchup in terms of quarterbacks. So in terms of receiving, their top 3 listed receivers all appear to be possible returners for the Bees. You had number 6, Cameron Bushnell, not really sure. He's listed with 2 receptions for 44 yards. Number 88, Maddox Ernst, he had 3 receptions for 41 yards. Number 42, Jackson Jepson, not to be confused with our local Jackson Jensen. All right, it's very close though. Number 42, Jackson Jepson, with 1 reception for 17 yards. Now, that's not a whole lot to go off of, and I understand that entirely, right? Again, they didn't post stats, and it was kind of hard to get a feel for it. So, to me, it'll be the quarter. I think I lost myself in my notes. Look at me trying to multitask and messing it up. Being as the next 2 quarterbacks or receivers, that were listed were seniors, I think it's safe to assume that those 3 will be making a return. And from what they did have posted, it did seem like they were pretty decent. So maybe keep an eye on them if you're the coaching staff. I'm sure they're already well aware of that. But for fans' perspective, I think that too. We've got to look at it making big plays against the Golden Eagles there, at least down the field. But again, that'll hinge dramatically on who's going to be playing quarterback for them. And again, nothing was really listed for the backup, Caden Reyes. So it's really hard to tell. But their top 3 rushers through those 3 games that were listed for them were also seniors. So, and the backup quarterback, being the likely returner, he only had 2 carries for 11 yards. So I don't know how much of that's going to be implemented into their game plan. It's going to be kind of interesting to see. Now, defensively, it looked like the Bees, 2 of their top 5 listed defenders in total tackles, at least, might be returning. You had number 45, Logan Cefalo. He led the charge on their stats with 19 total tackles, and number 11, Landon Harding. He was 4th with 13 total tackles. They did record an impressive 7 sacks in those 3 games listed, with potential returner number 73, Chance Richards, securing 2 of those. As for interceptions, Cefalo was the only likely returner listed there, and he had 1 on the season. So now with that, I could, with what I could put together from the teams they played, I literally went through and I looked at each individual stat listing that they put up, okay, and tried to compile some more information to get an idea of what the Golden Eagles might be facing as they take on the Box Elder Bees. And it looks like the Bees gave up, on average, 183 passing yards a game, and they gave up an average of 155 rushing yards against their defense last year. So Viewmont hit them big for 412 passing yards in a single game, and Bonneville dropped 335 passing yards against them. Bountiful ran all over them for 356 yards, and Woods Cross had 243 yards against the Bees. So they appear to have done pretty good in the interception category against teams, throwing only 7 on the season per available stats. And again, that was me taking it from what the other teams listed. So, take that with a grain of salt. But defensively, it looked like they snagged 10 interceptions on the season for the Bees. So that secondary was definitely active. They lost 9 fumbles on the year offensively. But however, defensively, they recovered 11. So it definitely looks like they have active hands for sure. So that's something that the Golden Eagles are probably going to want to keep an eye out for. As I'd imagine, it's probably something that's coached there, right? Or I mean, maybe they just got lucky. I don't know, but that's a pretty good stat. So offensively, it looks like the teams collected a total of 21 sacks on the Bees, though, with Granger and Bear River each collecting 6 in their games against them. So the Bees are coached by head coach Carson Mund. Now, Coach Mund has struggled as a head coach previously in Logan, where he coached for 1 year, recording a record of 2-8 overall. He coached in West Jordan, where he went 8-13 in his 2 seasons there. And last year with the Bees, he went 4-7. So far, he is a 14-28 career record. Now, I don't say that to pass judgment, okay? Doing this podcast, I've seen that statistically, first-year coaches and programs don't see a lot of success. It is slightly concerning that, one second, I'm sorry. It is slightly concerning as the year before he took over, the Bees went 5-2 in region, and they had a pretty good season, going 9-3 overall. So they definitely kind of backtracked a little bit. Starting out rough like that could just be an indication of the players they lost. Is really what I think it boils down to, and the entire, because it looks like the year before he started, the entire receiving corps was pretty much seniors. So their top 5 rushers were seniors. 3 of their 4 listed quarterbacks were seniors. Defensively, 4 of their top 5 total tackle leaders were seniors. 3 out of 5 of their interception leaders were seniors. So a lot of seniors on that defense for Box Elder. So it really looks like he came into a rebuilding program, looking to see what they had and get his program running fluidly, right? So without knowing much of the team themselves, I think a 4-7 season for them last year is actually a little positive, considering the concerning numbers he had with different programs. But again, to be fair, he wasn't really at either one of those previous coaching positions long enough to build anything, in my opinion. So, take it with a grain of salt. But historically, numbers-wise, the coaches seem to struggle. So it'll be interesting to see what they've got coming into this matchup against our Deseret Peak Golden Eagles. But I still think this will be a solid opener for them. For the Eagles, the Golden Eagles. I really do. I mean, it's a first-year program, players coming from 3 different previous programs. So you're trying to implement your system while fighting against other systems, muscle memory type problems, right? And you've got all the spotlight on you because you're the new shiny thing in the area and that everyone's looking at, right? And I don't know if Coach Buckhammer, apologies if I said that incorrectly, but I don't know if he's coached high school football before or not. I wasn't able to really find anything, but I'm sure it's a lot, and I'm sure it's extremely exciting, but at the same time, probably stressful in its own way, right? So I think starting off against a team that has seen some pretty good competition, but is also trying to fine-tune their own system is a great matchup for them, and it'll likely get a little sloppy at times, I'd imagine, but I think it could turn out to be a good game for sure. So best of luck to the Golden Eagles as they soar into their opening game. I feel like the catchphrases are going to speak for themselves with this team. I really do. You can't say that. I mean, I guess I could come up with some other ones, like the Stallions will, I don't know, kick their way in. I don't know. I'll figure out something. But nonetheless, good luck to them. Again, they start their season out on August 15th at home. At home against Box Elder at 7 p.m. So if you can make it to that, but please get out there and support this new school. It's going to be super interesting to see, and we wish them nothing but the best of luck. Now we are going to transition to Tooele. The Buffaloes, they also have a new head coach this season, Coach Tooele Matagi, and I think I rehearsed that one several times. Anybody who's listened to any of these podcasts know that I have a tendency to butcher names. So I did my best to try to pronounce that as best I could. Names are tough for me sometimes. I spent quite a bit of time in a profession where everybody's name was on their chest and you just called people by rank most of the time anyways, so you didn't have to learn how to say it. But they also have a new coach, Coach Tooele Matagi. Now, I did have the luxury to meet this gentleman at a basketball game. I was actually there watching I can't remember if it was the girls or the boys, but I was there watching Tooele. and I happened to actually just by chance be sitting next to him on the day that they introduced him to the fans. So he seems like a really great guy. He's got a very adorable family. His kids were rambunctious but controlled and happy-go-lucky. So I think he's a really good guy. He seems to be extremely energetic, and I think he's extremely excited just based on the very brief, by the way, very brief interaction that I had with him. So I think it's going to be good. And if my information is correct, he was on the Stansbury staff before getting his opportunity with Tooele. I do think that that's correct, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But if I understand correctly, he came over from Stansbury. And so heading into this season, I feel like that experience will be extremely valuable for the Buffaloes because Stansbury had a really good season last year. And I'm super excited to see what the Buffaloes do with this, fresh blood, I guess you could say, right? And so last year, the Buffaloes, because they struggled, they went 4-7 overall. They ended up going 3-3 in region, despite having rushed for 3,190 yards as a team, so just under 3,200 yards as a team for 30 touchdowns. Now, they carried the ball 560 times compared to only passing it 76 times for a grand total of 644 passing yards and 5 touchdowns. Now, I don't know what the game plan is for the new coach, but I imagine it'll be a little bit more balanced with an increased focus on passing the ball. At least I would hope. Because the truth is, though they displayed amazing numbers rushing the ball, it didn't really translate to the win category, right? So I would imagine they're looking to change up a little bit. Now, of their just roughly 3,200 rushing yards, Rosser and Gritzmacher, they were seniors last year. They accounted for 2,232 of those. And then with possible returning players like Maverick Clarkson, who I believe is a receiver, but he was third on their list with 543 yards, averaging 4.9 per carry, and he received about 19% of the attempts. So I'm sure they'll still be able to effectively run the ball. I just don't know if it'll be as impressive from a numbers standpoint as it was the year prior. And I also don't know if it should be because, again, like we said, it didn't really translate to the win category for him. So who knows? And last year they had Gus Pater at quarterback. I don't know if he's projected to be the starter for them this year or not, but if so, I think there's some potential there. He definitely struggled last year for them, right? Just not sure how much of that was because of lack of reps and opportunities, right? I think from a frame perspective, he could definitely prosper. He's a decent-sized quarterback, in my opinion. On Max Preps, they had him listed at 6'3", 170 pounds, and it looked like he had the power to get the ball down the field, just struggled with accuracy and timing. And again, I think you could attribute a lot of that to the heavy run game that Tooele had, just being out of sync with it, right? So I do think that there's potential there, but to be fair, I didn't see as many of their games as I would have liked to. So perhaps it just isn't there. I don't know. But I do think that if Tooele wants to be successful moving forward, they will need to improve their passing game for sure from last year. I don't think that they can hit another season of just trying to run the ball down everybody's throats. I just don't think it's going to work for them. So hopefully we see some improvement there. But defensively, the Buffaloes collected 19 sacks. They had 39 tackles for loss, 12 interceptions, and 7 caused fumbles. And they were led in sacks by number 58, Dixon, who should be returning this season as a senior. He totaled 8 sacks on the season and 82 total tackles. So he really did his thing for them. And again, he should be returning for them. And we look for him to continue to do great things on the defensive side of the ball. All of the Buffalo's interceptions were gathered by seniors, so that secondary looks to have been impacted big time by graduation, making it hard to say what it'll look like for them coming into this year. But despite having put up some good numbers defensively, the Buffalo's defense allowed 371 points last year. Just about 2,500 passing yards allowed against their defense and just under 2,000 rushing yards allowed. So I think looking at that, the secondary is going to need to step up big time for them this year and help control that a bit. Against the run, Tooele looked to have done a pretty good job, most of the season limiting big games, but as the season progressed, they started to let up more and more. So not sure if there was injuries there or what might have happened, but they definitely struggled towards the latter part of the season. And again, without knowing what may have caused that, it's hard to say. But I'm sure that's something that they're gonna look to continue to improve on. So for me, I'm looking for Tooele to step up their defensive play, right? Particularly in the secondary. And that's not to say that they did bad. I just think I've always been under the impression that it's easier to figure out your scoring when you can make sure the other team's not scoring, right? So if you're struggling offensively, you can work through that a lot easier if you can stop the other team from scoring. And that's why I say that, right? And I'm also looking for the improved passing game. I really think, I said it a lot last year, and I really think that that's where Tooele's biggest room for improvement is. So I'm excited, right? I'm excited to see what they do. I think that if they can improve on those fronts, they could see a turnaround season. I really do. Sure, you lost some great rushers, but Clarkson, who again I think is a receiver, but he looks more than capable of keeping your run game relevant. He did very well from that position on 19% of the attempts. So he's definitely capable. So it'll be interesting to see what Coach Tooele has in store for them. As for defense, it looks like a lot of the stat leaders for Tooele last year were seniors. So I'm excited to see what this next group has to offer. Now, special teams could also be an area of improvement as well. They averaged about 17.5 yards on kick return last year, with their longest being 42 yards. Now, it really helped their offense if they could get a boost in that category, I think. And it didn't look like they forced many punts last year, only having 6 punt returns on the season. So hopefully they can improve there. But they also lost Wilcox, their kicker. He did a fantastic job for them last year, going 9-13 on field goals, with 42 yards being his longest, and he was 28 for 32 on PATs. So he punted 26 times, averaging 38.5 yards per punt, with his longest being 54. So definitely a blow to their special teams there. It will be interesting to see what the next man up does for Tooele. Now, Tooele will start their season off on the road, taking on the Layton Lancers, who equally struggled last year. They went 4-7 overall, 0-5 in 6A Region 1. The Lancers looked to have had a 60-40 split on play calling, favoring the pass, with just under 2,300 yards, 15 touchdowns, but 20 interceptions. So they struggled there. The secondaries were looks like picking them apart, right? But they still put up some pretty good yards. Nothing to really hang your head on, that's for sure. But those 20 interceptions probably definitely hurt them. Now, their quarterback was a senior, so it's tough to say what it looks like heading into this season, as the quarterbacks listed that might be returning, they didn't see much action for him. So hard to know, again, similar to the Deseret Peak matchup, right? It's hard to know what they're going to face coming into this game from the quarterback position, but we'll see. The Lancers only rushed for 611 yards as a team last season, averaging 2.7 yards a carry. Now, the bulk of the rushing attempts were from seniors, so looking at who might be returning for them, I would guess that number 31, Solomon Lee, would be their RB1. Averaging 2.5 yards a carry last year. It also looks like he might be a decent receiving option for them, as he had 5 receptions for 40 yards and a touchdown last year. So that might be something they look to implement more, because clearly they weren't having much success running the ball last year. So that might be something that they try to incorporate more. Now, outside of that, their biggest threat receiver looks like he might be coming back is number 6, Tayon Halbash. Again, I hope I said that correctly. Now, in his sophomore season with the Lancers, which was last year, he had 62 receptions for 975 yards and 6 touchdowns. That young man had a phenomenal year. And so he'll be going into his junior year. I expect he's going to be coming back. He led the team in receiving yards, so I imagine he's going to be their target number 1 for sure. At least I didn't see anything that would suggest anybody else. Now, defensively, they look to be in a very similar situation as Tooele, right? Most of their stat leaders were seniors last year, so hard to say what that might look like for them coming into the season. But they only collected 6 sacks on the season and 19 tackles for loss. So a lot of room for improvement for the Lancers in that category, I think. When they won teams averaged 135 passing yards and 102 rushing yards. But when they lost, teams averaged 224 passing yards and 163 rushing yards. So, assuming the run game is still effective for Tooele, I think they can manage, right? I think they can manage that, and it'll be the passing game, I think, that will be the determining factor. Can they get that implemented? And can they implement that into their strategy heading into this season? I think that's the wild card for Tooele right now, because we don't have anything to go off of really from last year. Just not a lot to really look forward to. So the hope is that was improved in the offseason and leading into this season. So the stats suggest that the Lancers are capable of holding the rushing game back in the games that they won, where they only allowed more than 100 yards in one of their 4 wins. So that's a pretty impressive stat for the Lancers, and something that Tooele should probably keep an eye on. If they can't get the running game going, the Lancers seem to do a pretty good job defensively stopping the run. But again, how much of that was based off of last year's players? So hard to really know. But if they can make that tough on Tooele, it might be problematic for them, right? So again, that game will be August 15th at 7 p.m. against the Layton Lancers. They should be on the road. Yes, Tooele at Layton. So good luck to them as they look to start their season off on a positive note. And I'm hopeful for you guys. I really am. And I can't wait to see how you guys all adjust from last season. Because, again, it was a rough season. Even though you guys did amazing things in the stat category, it just didn't translate to the wins, right? So definitely excited to see what you guys do. Fresh blood in there. You got a coach from a good program last year. Hopefully he can bring some good things, kind of bring some cohesion. I personally feel like the stuff that the Tooele football Instagram page has been doing, it looks like there's a different feel and a different vibe kind of going on around there. And so I'm really hopeful for you guys. I really am, and I can't wait to see what you guys do. So best of luck. Go out there and kick some butt. As for Stansbury, now the Stallions also have a new head coach this year, Jason Walker. And according to Stansbury High School Facebook page, he was most recently the defensive coordinator at Bountiful High School, where they went 13-1 on the season and won a state championship. If Max Preps is accurate, his defense only allowed 264 points on the season, with 4 games holding the teams to single digits. So their defense really did a good job. And from what I understand, he was the coach of that defense, the coordinator of that defense, and he is now Stansbury's head football coach. Now, Coach Walker takes over a team that went 8-4 last year overall and a perfect 6-0 in 4A Region 10. The Stallions were about a 60-40 split roughly on play calling favoring the run. They passed for just about 2,000 yards and rushed for 2,400-ish yards. They collected 22 passing touchdowns and 29 rushing touchdowns. Defensively, they had 17 tackles for loss, 13 sacks, 16 interceptions, and only 1 caused fumble. So I imagine with the defensive-minded head coach, forced turnovers, is probably an area of emphasis, and it will be exciting to see if that area is increased for them, the caused fumbles. I think that's where I look to see probably a bigger jump in the stats, because one thing I remember from watching Stansbury, and again, it wasn't a whole lot, okay, but what I do remember watching from them, they were a very balanced team. They weren't heavily reliant on one or 2 individuals to kind of cause all the plays for them. They were extremely balanced, and I think that's going to be a good matchup for them. Where I lost myself in my notes, I'm sorry. So 13 sacks, though, is definitely not terrible by any means. And I imagine he'd like to be able to get more pressure in the backfield as well. So I think that mixture is going to be really, really good. Now, as for the offense, I think there's a lot to look forward to. But this is also where it gets kind of interesting, right? The Stallions had a ton of seniors last year. I remember doing the senior salute thing for them, and I was just like, where does it end? Where does it end? If I remember, it was like 30-something seniors. They had a ton of seniors last year. and some of them in pretty key positions, right? You had quarterback Coleman Dearden. He passed for 1,466 yards, 14 touchdowns. He was their second highest rusher with 560 yards and 8 touchdowns. In the rushing attack, you had Tyson Ferry. He led the team with 913 yards and 8 touchdowns. He was third in receiving with 20 receptions, 194 yards. And at receiver, they were led by Luke Rich, who had an amazing 712 yards on 39 receptions and 6 touchdowns, right? So if having a ton of seniors last year wasn't concerning enough, right? Deseret Peak also opened up. And from what I understand, this is just my general understanding, the boundary affected Stansbury probably the most, from what I understand. I could be completely wrong about that, but if my understanding is correct, they got affected quite heavily by that boundary, right? And there's players from all the schools making the switch over there. So who knows who might be returning for this Stallion squad as they come into this new season because of those two factors, right? So just going off who might be coming back, right? This is all up in the air because we don't know. This is just an assumption based off of who we think might be coming back. The soon-to-be junior quarterback, Brighton Rutzel, apologies if I say it incorrectly, I'm sorry. But he's an exciting young man to watch. I actually got to see a fair amount of him because I have ties to the JV squad from last year, and so I would check out those games. And he's an exciting young man to watch. He really is. He threw for 479 yards on varsity on only 31 attempts, and he had a completion percentage of 65%. He had 8 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. He only rushed for 94 yards, and that was on 16 carries. He definitely looked to be a pass-first quarterback, which might be slightly different than Dearden was, right? But don't take that as he can't run, because he definitely can run. And he had a touchdown as well, rushing the ball. So this young man, he's got an arm for sure, and I think he's got a ton of potential, in my opinion. And that's, again, assuming he returns for them. And if the offensive coordinator is who I believe that it is, I think this would be a promising outlook for the Stallions going into the season. I think that's going to be a good combination, just based off of what I've seen from that coordinator and what I've seen from that player. I think it's going to mesh really well together, and I think there's a lot of positive outlook, assuming, again, that he returns, right? So, losing Rich at wide receiver, that's a big blow to your passing game. He did great for them. However, number 82, Lael Rhodes, he had an equally impressive season last year, going for 381 yards on only 18 receptions. He averaged 21.22 yards per reception, and he had 5 touchdowns. So definitely promise there to look forward to. You had number 13, Noah Cephas. He's also likely to return for them, and he went 165 yards on 11 receptions, averaging 15 per catch, and 2 touchdowns for him. So 2 returning positives in the receiver category. And if you get that quarterback back, I think there's a lot of promise there, right? Now, running back, this is where it gets a little interesting, right? You got number 24, Carter Peterson. He would likely be the RB1 in my mind, just based off the action that he saw at the varsity level last year. He had 301 yards on 59 carries, averaging 5.1 yards a carry and 2 touchdowns. He also contributed in the passing attack with 5 receptions for 49 yards and a touchdown. You also have number 21, Wyatt Oliver, who rushed for 72 yards on 24 carries and 2 touchdowns. So not a lot of looks for that young man, but he seemed to do a sufficient job there. So I think that 1-2 punch combo, again, assuming the OC is who I think it is. I've seen effective play calls from that coordinator where he uses a 2 running back set. And I think that might be something that they can use effectively in their offense, because, again, I've seen them implement that in the past, and I thought it went really well personally. So, yeah, I think it could be really good. Nothing like Stansbury. That's the thing about the Stansbury team from last year, right? And I noticed this when I was covering them. Like, when you just look at the stats, right? Like, nothing like really was like just shot out at you, right? But when you would see these young men play, like they they played as a cohesive unit. They really did, and it was really good to see. And maybe it was just a byproduct of the game that I actually got to see. Okay, that's very fair. I'll admit that. But that game that I did get to see, that was my takeaway from it. So offensively, I think they could be in a really good position. That's how I felt. Now, despite seniors leaving and the new school opening up, because we know that Deseret Peak will not have a senior class this year, I'm assuming that last year's juniors will be returning. All right. Now, the only wild card, in my opinion, is Rutzel. He will be a junior this year, so he could have made the switch. I don't know. And if that's the case, then that could be problematic for the Stallions, as they didn't appear to have anyone else in the chute for that position from what I saw or what I was able to see on the stats. So if he doesn't return, hey, maybe it's a whole different outlook than what I've kind of projected here. But assuming that he returns, I think they've got a lot of promising things to look forward to with that offensive group. Now, defensively, they lost a lot. 6 of their top 10 in total tackles were seniors. Their leaders in sacks their leader in sacks was senior Landon Wilson. Their leader for interceptions, Gabe Binkley. They were seniors. So definitely going to have up-and-comers taking the lead here. But again, I think they will be in a good position. Number 9, Bronx Baker, was second on the team in total tackles with 82 on the season. He had 2 sacks and 1 interception. But he will also be a junior this year. So not sure what his decision might be, where he might end up playing. But assuming he stays, I would look at this young man to dominate this year for the Stallions on defense. He did really good for them last year, and I don't see that slowing down. Now, Colton Danes will likely be returning this year. He did well for them, collecting 39 total tackles and 2 interceptions. Landis Roberts, 37 total tackles. Cole Tincher, 34 total tackles and 1 tackle for loss. So there's definitely a void on the defensive side, and it will be interesting to see who steps up for the Stallions and what the coach can bring to improve their overall performance. But I'm excited to see what they do defensively. You got a defensive-minded head coach who I think is probably more than capable of keeping that together in a system that's already kind of built around their defensive prowess. So definitely excited to see what they do. Now for special teams, you got number 34, Ethan Clegg. He'll likely be returning for them as a kicker, coming off a season in which he had 56 kickoffs for 2,500 yards and 1 touchback. He was 41 of 45 on PATs and only 1 for 1 on field goal for 34 yards. So he made the one he tried. So that's promising, right? But for punts, I'm not sure what they're going to do, though. As the 2 listed punters for them were seniors last year, so that'll be interesting to see who's going to be punting for them. Maybe they're probably helping for the game plan where hopefully we don't have to punt, right? I don't know. Maybe they got a punter in the chute, but nothing that was listed for last year that would say, hey, this is probably going to be the guy. For kickoff returns, Peterson and Cephas will probably be the only likely returners who saw action last year. So special teams could be an area of emphasis maybe for them. As for the most part, it was pretty average for them last year. Like I know that they had the touchdown return in the Tooele game. Salahuddin, I believe, was his last name. That kid flew like the wind, man. But stats wise, nothing really jumped out, right? So I would just say it was pretty average. They didn't do terrible. I just think that maybe they might want to look to improve some of that a little bit, right? In terms of progression, right? Last year, the Stallions did a fantastic job against the run, only allowing 1,571 rushing yards. They did an equally impressive job against the pass, allowing only 1,825 yards. So defensively, defense already seems to be integrated into their identity. And again, they did lose a fair amount of players coming into this season. So it will be interesting to see if the returners are up to the task, right? And the Stallions will get a chance to show us all that on their season opener, where they start their season off at home taking on the Skyline Eagles, who really did not have a good season last year, as they went 1-10 overall, 0-6 in 5A Region 6. So not very good season for them. They had a lot of different passing stats, so not sure if they had injuries or they were just trying to get creative or if they were just seeing what worked. But their rushing leader was number 26, Jonah Miley, who will be a junior this year. He led the Eagles with 254 yards on 63 carries and 2 touchdowns. The passing attack was nothing to write home about for Skyline. Yeah, it was. They threw for 602 yards and only 2 touchdowns, but also had 11 interceptions on the season. So definitely not a good passing attack for the Skyline Eagles last year. So I imagine they're trying to improve that, but who knows? Their leading potential returning receivers for the Eagles is number 23, Alex Brown. He had 67 yards on 9 receptions. However, defensively, this is where I think the Eagles probably saw the Skyline Eagles probably saw their best categories, right? They had 27 sacks on the season, and it looks like a good portion of them came from players who are likely to return. They finished the season with 7 interceptions on the year, but they appear to be primarily from players who graduated. So the defensive pressure in the backfield should probably be expected to be returning, but that secondary might be vulnerable, right? Special teams also nothing too impressive there. It looks like they didn't attempt a single field goal all year and went 3 for 4 on PATs. So I don't want to jump the gun by any means, but it looks like there is a lot to figure out for this Skyline team, and nothing appears to be hinting at a promising turnaround. But each year can be different. That's why we love football, right? Each year can definitely be different. So maybe they come out with something new, but I believe this is their head coach's second season as the head coach. It's his second season as head coach for these guys. So perhaps there's something brewing for them. It's just hard to find a positive when you only won one game in 2 seasons, because the season before that was not very good either. So it's hard to find the positive, but again, having done this podcast enough and looked at enough of the stats, first-year coaches, they don't generally tend to do so well. It's kind of an anomaly when they do well, right? So maybe he's got some adjustments made, and they're an entirely different team. So I like Stansbury's chances in this one. I really do. I think it'll be a good introduction for them and a good chance to see what works, right? However, I also like this matchup for Skyline as well, because I think it gives them the same opportunities facing a rebuilding Stallions team in a way, right? The entire coaching staff is different, or maybe not the entirety of it, but maybe some of them stuck around. I'm not entirely sure about that, but it's different. It's new, and there's some changes to the roster that have probably inevitably happened, right? So in a lot of ways, they're a rebuilding team as well, right? So there are bound to be some missteps as things get hashed out, and I think that could build some confidence for Skyline and Stansbury. So I really like this matchup. I don't know that it's going to be, anything super crazy, right? But I think it's going to be a good matchup for both these teams. So we wish Stansbury the best of luck as they enter their season, and I'm super excited to see how the Stallions kick their way into this coming season. Look at that. I'm coming up with punchlines right off that. How about that? How about that? By the way, nobody's in the chat. I don't know. Maybe the time is probably not the best. 4 p.m.'s probably not the best time. But anyways, we wish Stansbury the best of luck as they enter this season. And we want to see what they do after a promising year last year. We want to see what they do. So good luck, gentlemen. We're rooting for you. Go kick some butt, and we're super excited for you guys. All right, this is live. All right, so I can't really edit it right now. I told you guys to drink water. I need to drink water, so give me just a second. All right, sorry about that. All right, now we're going to transition into Grantsville. All right, now football season is where, unfortunately, I get a little bit biased. My son still plays, and I'm not willing to miss his stuff to go see these other games. So if I can make it work, I will. But if they conflict, I'm definitely always going to be at Grantsville. I get a good opportunity to see some of the JV programs, but the varsity players, I'm really just reliant on what their staff puts out on Max Preps for Stats. And obviously I can look at scores. Sometimes I'll watch the games back or whatever the case may be, but in person getting to see it, which is definitely different, right? I don't get a lot of coverage for the other schools. So this year will be the last year for that. So hopefully moving forward, it gets a lot more interesting and a lot more encompassing, I guess, right, of all of our teams. But unfortunately, this is where I get a little biased. All right. So after having a good season last year, despite a head coaching change, right? Because Grantsville had a new head coach last year. The Grantsville Cowboys ended up going 9-3 overall and 4-1 in 3A North. However, this year they have a bunch of staff changes that have happened. Defensive coordinator change, offensive coordinator change, several other positions as well, right? So that doesn't always mean trouble in paradise, okay? But it's quite possible that they do just as well, if not potentially better, moving into the new season. But there is room in the conversation for possible concerns, right? Because, I mean, you got the same head coach, but everybody around him changed up, right? So there's room in the conversation. It doesn't mean that there's going to be anything bad, but I think there's room in the conversation. Now, offensively, they threw for 2,267 yards, 23 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, led by soon-to-be junior quarterback Dallin Van Vliet, who had an impressive year going for 2,100 yards, 21 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 90 carries for 162 yards and 3 touchdowns. They saw promising play from freshman, soon-to-be sophomore backup Grayson Warren, who was 6 of 9 and 99 yards during his opportunity. So that's promising, right? In the rushing attack, they were led by recently graduated Jaden Atkinson, who finished the season with 1,284 yards on 180 carries and 17 touchdowns. Now, as a team, they tallied 1,593 rushing yards on the season and 21 touchdowns. In the receiving area, they were led by the dynamic duo of Jackson Jensen and Jordan Fossen. These two combined for 1,300 receiving yards and 14 touchdowns. Jensen took the lead after a season-long back and forth with 685 yards on 32 receptions and 7 touchdowns. Fossen would finish with 622 yards, 50 receptions and 7 touchdowns as well. Now, all those stats came from Max Preps, okay? So if they're inaccurate, don't burn my house down. But that was exciting to see last year, and both those two should be returning this year as incoming seniors. So definitely keep your eye on that. The Cowboys scored 338 points on the season while only allowing 255. Now, defensively, the Cowboys ended up with 31 sacks on the season, led by recently graduated Talon Butler with 8.5 on average, 8.5 sacks on the season, 6. Whoa, that's wrong. I typoed that. I'm going to get that. He had a ton of total tackles. Let's see. No, we're talking about the team here. I'm reading my notes wrong. I apologize, guys. The team ended with 636 total tackles on the season, led by Mason Butler with 104. Also recently graduated, though. And they would finish the season with 16 interceptions, led by Jordan Fossen with 5. Now, special teams, the Cowboys racked up 852 kickoff return yards, led by Jordan Fossen with 502. He was also our Swiss Army knife player last year. He was all over the place for the Cowboys. He was in several different categories for him, but he also led in punt returns with 169 yards. When it comes to kicking, Brent Knickerbocker, K-N-I-C-K, Bacher led the charge with 1,316 kickoff yards and 3 touchbacks. That's a tough name to say, all right, especially when you're parched. As for punts, Coulter Dong led the Cowboys with 845 yards on 19 punts, with 56 being his longest. Dallin Van Vliet, the quarterback, also contributed with 600 yards and on 12 punts, with 71 yards being his longest. I'm pretty sure that came from a really, really gracious bounce, but hey, it's in the record books nonetheless, right? Field goals and PAT, Brent Knickerbocker had a fantastic year, going 33 of 35 on PATs and 8 for 9 on field goals, with his longest being 45 yards on the season. And that was quite the moment to see. That young man was really proud of himself, as he should have been. That was pretty cool to see. So moving forward, now the Cowboys have also been affected by this new school opening up, okay? Now perhaps not as dramatically as some of the other schools, but affected nonetheless. They too will likely be impacted from departing seniors in prominent roles. However, like Stansbury, the biggest impact seems to be on the defensive side of the ball. Now, offensively, we're looking at a returning Dallin Van Vliet at quarterback as he heads into his junior year, looking to improve after practically doubling his passing stats from his freshman to sophomore year. He does have a new coordinator now, and some new staff members. So Not sure if that's going to, how that might affect that. Hopefully in a positive way, but we're not really sure, right? And the Cowboys also lost standout running back Jaden Atkinson, but look to have a solid replacement in number 26 Rigdon Murdoch. Now last year he had 86 yards on 19 carries, averaging 4.5 yards. It'll be interesting to see what he can do, assuming he gets the RB1 spot, okay, or the RB1 opportunity. Their depth at running back is slightly concerning from my perspective. Number 10, Coulter Dong, is likely the number 2. He did well in JV games that I got to see, but he hasn't seen much action on varsity. So not sure what he might bring to the table as last year. He only had 1 carry for 13 yards. Now, I saw him in varsity. He seemed to do pretty well. I'm not really sure who they might have else, in the shoot for that running back position. So the depth at running back is slightly concerning a little bit. But yeah, from a receiver aspect, the dynamic duo. That's I'm gonna have to come up with like a Batman theme song for those guys. Dynamic. I don't know. That was pretty corny. But the dynamic duo of Jensen and Fossen should be back in action as they head into their senior years, as we discussed earlier, right? But the additional targets for Van Vliet kind of remain a mystery at the moment, as the remaining 4 top receivers for the Cowboys graduated. Peyton Thornton, he was a solid third option, as he would usually break free thanks to the added attention on Fossen and Jensen, right? Tice Fuentes, he was a sure-handed over-the-middle receiver for them. So who will come in and fill that void for them on their offense is still a little unknown right now. But I think for Dallin to achieve the goals he mentioned in his interview with us, they're going to need someone. They're definitely going to need someone. I know Coulter Dong has some good size as a receiver, potentially. That could help out. Ty Holm, he's listed at 6'3". He could be another solid corner of the end zone type threat for him, right? Throw it up, let him go get it. Maybe in the red zone place for sure. Number 11, Brock Hodgson. He's not necessarily the biggest receiver, but he's quick, man. He is quick, and he seems to have energy for days. So I think he could definitely fill in some of those voids. Another player I think could kind of be a surprise for them as well in receiving. He didn't see a lot of action, but I think from a physical standpoint, he's got the potential. Is number 2, Porter Collins. I think that could be a little bit of a surprise for him if they use it the right way. Again, he didn't see a ton of action, okay? But I think that could possibly be in there as well. And he's probably not scouted much either. So, he does have the frame, in my opinion, and potential to contribute. That's just my opinion, though. So I think there's a very solid opportunity to have a good receiving core again for this Cowboys offense as they move into this coming year. Now, lineman concerns, I think will be the biggest factor for this offense. Historically, they're undersized. Okay, but they have managed to do pretty well despite that. However, their depth isn't there, and it could prove to be problematic, especially if there are injuries or when fatigue sets in, right? So that's slightly concerning. But again, I've doubted that line a few times, and they've kind of, they've let some things up, right? But they did much better than I think probably a lot of people expected. Yeah. So, but that is an area of concern. Depth at running back, depth at lineman, definitely an area of concern. Defensively, 4 of their top 5 tacklers were seniors last year. But I think with players coming up behind them, will do a great job attempting to fill that void. I really do. Number 14, Easton Hammond. He got a lot of experience last year, making some big plays for the defense, tallying 57 total tackles, 9 tackles for loss, and 5 sacks. You had number 8, Jordan Fossen. He was a lockdown corner in almost every sense of the phrase with 47 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, and 5 interceptions. You got number 27, Owen Sweet, with 37 total tackles on the season last year. He looks to be in pretty good shape, too, heading into this season. Ran into him not too long ago, right? So I'm sure he will see an increased role, and I feel confident he will do well. You got number 24, Jake Bodell, with 33 total tackles last year and 1 tackle for loss. He's likely to see increased roles as well. And of course, my man, number 87, Porter Davis. He had 32 total tackles, 9 tackles for loss, and 6 sacks, but I think it easily could have been 10 with just a split-second increase in some of his moves, because he was right there. He was in that backfield causing problems pretty much all season long. He did a really great job. So I easily feel like that stat could have been 10 sacks on the season, but nonetheless, he ended with 6, but he did a great job. And then you've got number 5, Jackson Jensen. We'll likely see an increased role on defense, I imagine. If I remember correctly, he was playing safety for JV. I'm pretty sure that was the position he was playing. I could be wrong about that, but he did really good for him, and he's got like deceptive energy, right? Like he doesn't look like he's got the energy to keep going sometimes, but he does. He does. So, look at this. I have a comment. Sorry, guys, I got distracted. Any Grantsville receivers that are coming in that you're excited for? Yeah, no, I'm excited for a lot of them. I'm excited for a lot of them. That was saved by his blood clothing. No, I'm excited for a lot of them. I think there's a ton of potential. Obviously, we know that Jackson Jensen and Jordan Foster, they're going to do their thing. We know that. You know, they showed us what they're capable of last year. We know that they're reliable targets. Obviously, teams are going to game plan against them because of that. Definitely excited for them. But I think these up-and-comers, I really do feel like, given the opportunity to kind of fill some of those voids, I really like it. I think that it's going to be a solid option. The question, I think, is going to be, are they going to have time to let these receivers break free? I think that's really what it's going to boil down to. And if they can do that, I think it's going to be pretty amazing for them from the passing attack. So where did we leave off? Oh, we were talking about Jensen on defense, right? So I'm pretty sure he's going to play. He was playing safety for him on JV. I imagine that's probably because I know Evan Bunderson. You know, he was a senior last year. That fills that void. So maybe Jackson takes in that spot. I'm not really sure, but I think he'll do a solid job there. I really do think so. He's in pretty good shape. You know, he's got some height to him. I think it's going to be a really good matchup. So I'm interested to see what goes on there. You also had number 35, Jake Chittister on defense. He'll likely have a good season. He had 28 total tackles last year, 9 tackles for loss and 4 sacks. So we're looking for him to continue to do those things. I like the possibilities for this defense coming into this season, right? There was a ton of good players who left last year, but I think there's a ton of good players coming up behind him. New defensive coordinator, but not new to the program, right? So it'll be interesting to see what they throw in there to kind of adjust to that, right? So maybe it's better, maybe it's worse. I don't know. Maybe it's the same. And if it's the same, I don't think you have anything to worry about. You know, there's some things to really. There's some things to improve as always, right? But like, if it's the same, I don't think it's anything to really worry about now. Back in the comment section here, it says Ty Home, Coulter Dong looks really strong. My nephew told me Ty Home is super strong and fast and a big hit. Yeah, so when it comes to Ty, he was listed, what did I say? I had it in there. 6'3", I think it was. I don't remember. But yeah, he seems to have pretty good size for him. And that's why I think with the other two taking a lot of the attention, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for these guys to kind of break free and have some good seasons themselves. So, it's Coulter he's definitely an athletic kid. He's definitely an athletic kid. Like I said, they might need him more at the running back position, though. So, I don't know. Maybe that's not even where he's playing anymore. I saw him doing it in the JV games last year, so I just kind of assumed, and he was also he had a few stats for it. But no, I really do think that there's a lot of room for these. I don't want to say no names, right? Because they're on the stat sheet, but they didn't see a lot of the attempts, right? I think there's a lot of room for them to make a name for themselves. Now, getting to the special teams portion for Grantsville, assuming that number 4, Brent Knickerbocker, returns with his impressive kicking skills, I think they can continue to have the field goal option to keep them in tough games. If not, I don't know if they have a solid field goal kicker behind him, because I've watched Coulter for a few years now, and he does well on punts. But historically, he seemed to struggle a little bit on field goals. So that could be interesting in the event that Knickerbocker doesn't return. I don't know who's going to kick field goals for him. Maybe they got somebody just kind of sitting back waiting for his opportunity. I don't really know. But overall, I think there are a lot of promising things to look forward to this coming season for the Cowboys. However, the elephant in the room is the staff changes. And does that mess with the cohesion and effort at all, right? And with that change, and what what changes might increase miscommunications and mistakes, right? The line is a concern for me a little bit, right? Because again, historically undersized, they've always bounced back from that, but historically undersized and just lack of depth, right? The line is a concern for me a little bit, and it'll be interesting to see if they can overcome some of those obstacles like they have in previous years. Because last year I don't think anybody expected them to do as well as they did, and they overcame that very well. So Grantsville will not have the luxury though of easing into this. All right, they start their season on the road against San Juan, who went 11-2 overall last year and 4-0 in 2A South. One of their 2 losses last year came from Grantsville in the season opener last year. So there is that promising factor, right? And in the last 4 seasons, they've only lost 3 games. So that's pretty dang impressive. Last season, they scored a total of 669 points while only allowing 180. They threw for an impressive 3,760 yards with 60, with a 67 completion rate, 42 touchdowns, and only 10 interceptions. But their standout quarterback, Jayton Knight, graduated. All right, so who will we see? And it's most likely going to be number 2, Jagger Neves, assuming he takes the lead, of course. That's important because he was also their leading rusher, running for 1,004 yards on 134 carries and 22 touchdowns. Besides him, they didn't appear to have any returning rushers that stand out, so I think it's likely he is still the main option for rushing the ball. However, last year they rushed for a team total of 2,500 yards on 375 carries and collected 47 touchdowns. As for receiving, 4 of their top 5 receivers graduated, leaving Neves as the only returning receiver for them in the top 5. So I don't even know if this kid's going to play quarterback because he seems to do everything else for him, right? He just had stats at quarterback on max preps. So leaving for them in the top 5. Neves collected 595 yards on 39 receptions and 8 touchdowns for him. However, number 5, Trip Palmer, he did really well for them last year, going 219 yards on 13 receptions and 2 touchdowns. Defensively, they look to have a fair amount of returners, with Neves again looking to be at the top in total tackles, with 101 last year and 9 tackles for loss. The Broncos had 104 total tackles for loss last season and 23 sacks and 16 interceptions. Guys, I'm going to take another sip of water here because, man, what are we in? I don't even know how long we've been going here. It's been a minute. There's a lot to talk about though, so it works out. All right, so again, as we established for the Broncos, Neves seems to have done it all for them, and he's like one of their few returning players. But most of their sack leaders appear to have graduated last year. They had 23 sacks last year. Most of them seem to be gone. However, their leader in sacks was number 6, George McNaughton. He will likely be returning for them, and he led the team with 5 sacks on the year. In terms of interceptions, the Broncos will likely have 4 out of 5 of their leaders returning in that category, who collectively accounted for 12 of the 16 interceptions for their team. They were led by number 5, Trip Palmer, who had 5 on the season last year. Now, kickoff return, they were led by number 2, yet again, Jagger Neves, with 380 yards, his longest being 94 yards and 2 touchdowns. As a team, they returned 5 kickoffs for touchdowns, 4 pick sixes. So it doesn't look like they kicked a single field goal last year, and they went 58 of 79 on PATs. So it'll definitely be a tough game right out the gate for the Cowboys. 4 out of 10 of the interceptions for the Broncos last year came against the Cowboys. So that's very promising. That was clearly a huge factor for them in that win last year. Jaden Atkinson also helped last year with a tremendous game of 248 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. So this will be a good opportunity for Rigdon Murdoch to showcase what he brings to the team, I think, right? Showcase what he's going to be able to do to kind of fill that void, because it is a void, you know what I mean? And so I think that's a good matchup for him to be able to showcase that, because clearly it was an impactful part of their win last year. So Van Vliet played a pretty solid game last year against this team as well. That matchup last year, he threw for 244 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Jackson Jensen also had a spectacular game against the Broncos secondaries. He went for 156 yards on 7 receptions, and he had 2 touchdowns for himself. So I think whatever they learned about that, I think that the core group of players that they still have are more than capable of doing a repeat. It's really going to kind of boil down to what the Broncos have returning for them, because I don't know that you can rely on just Jagger Neves to do it all for him, right? So that'll definitely be interesting. So I definitely think the Cowboys can repeat the upset, however, this year, which is strange to call it an upset, right? But it is. I mean, that's a really good program down there. Clearly, it's a very good program. So I think they can repeat this year, winning that one. But they are the ones technically on the road this year. This game will be played at Snow College, if I'm not mistaken. It's kind of like a neutral middle point. So that could play a factor, right? They don't have the home effect. But either way, I think this will be a solid test for them right out the gate with a very good San Juan program. And I say program because it doesn't look like they're going to have a lot of returners, but I have a feeling that that's a good program. So those up-and-comers are probably going to be competent, and we're going to learn a lot about those guys this coming year. But they did lose quite a few players. And it only continues for them after this game, by the way. As week 2, we'll see the Cowboys facing off on the road against Richfield, who was definitely a problem for them last year. So the Cowboys definitely have 2 hard games right out the gate for them. Not a lot of time for any of those staff change mishaps that we kind of talked about, right? The potential for those, I shouldn't say they're going to be there, the potential for those staff change mishaps, right? So definitely going to be interesting to see. So good luck to the Cowboys as they head into their season. I can't wait to see what they do. I really can't, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think, there's a lot of questions there for me, right? And I'm excited to see what it looks like. And honestly, I hope that I hope that I'm proven wrong again, just like I was last year. I had some doubts last year. I was proven wrong, and I love to be proven wrong because that means that they're being successful, right? And so that part of it is awesome. So I'm definitely excited to see what they do. Overall, well, before we get into the overall closing of this, let's make sure I didn't miss anything in the chat. Talking about 7-on-7 stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think 7-on-7 are cool. I went to a few, helped out driving some players up to a couple of them. I think it's cool, but I'm definitely weary. I think it's more for the coaches just to see if things line up the way that they thought it was going to. But that's just my opinion. Yeah, no, the comments from Saved by His Blood Clothing, they're spot on. There's a ton of potential in these lesser known receivers coming in. I think there's a ton of potential. And again, I think it's really just going to boil down to, does Dallin have the time to let these players break free? Because I feel confident he's going to make a good pass. He's only improved. He's probably still going to make some mistakes, sure. He definitely has that I want to win about him, right? So I definitely feel like he'll probably still force a few things here and there, but I think it's going to be less. And so if these guys can break free, I think they're going to have a great chance. The receiving core is definitely primed to look to do very well. So overall, in conclusion, we'll start heading towards wrapping this up, right? I think this season for our schools here in Tooele, it could be a little underwhelming, I think, right? Pretty much all the programs are rebuilding in a way, right? And that can make it tough. We also have, the boundaries changing, which some players going to Deseret Peak. We also have players who transferred there just to play at the new school, right? 3 new head coaches and staff changes all around. So honestly, if our teams go 500 on the season, I would honestly say that's a success in a lot of ways, right? And I mean, when you factor in all the topics, I really think that's a solid goal. Now, obviously, nobody wants to hear that, and we obviously don't want them to only go 500. We want them to be as successful as possible. But I think realistically looking at it, I would say that's a win for our schools. I really do, because there's so many changes that took place, right? So yeah, I don't know. I think that would be a positive in a lot of ways. Now, that's not what anybody wants. Of course not. but realistically, I believe it'd be a success. I will say that in my opinion, Grantsville stands probably the best shot of going above 500, simply because of their returning offensive players, capable defensive returners, and their 3A class. Obviously, like every year can be different, but I like their odds against most of their matchups that they face. Obviously, nothing's a shoe in, right? But I feel like there's a couple of them where I really like their odds, and I think that makes it a little bit easier for them. Now, I don't want to make it seem like I don't think that the other schools can attain that, because I definitely do. I definitely think that they can. I think if you get a passing game going with what Tooele has got, they've got fresh blood going in there. I definitely think that they can. Stansbury, defensive, hearted already, and yeah, having a defensive coordinator-minded head coach come in, I feel like that defense is only going to improve, right? So the only question at that point is offense, and if assuming the OC is who I think it is, he's very passionate and he can get creative, right? And so if Russell returns for Stansbury, I think he will do great under that coordinator because of his play style. So it's quite possible they do very well. Again, Tooele has a passionate head coach, I think, capable returners, but he does need to change the culture there, and that might take a minute. It really might. They haven't had an above 500 season in 3 years. So there's a lot of work needed mentally, I think, in that program. So going 500 on the season would be a solid win, in my opinion, for Tooele. Does that mean that I think that that's where they need to stop? No, but not by any means. But I think that that's a solid win. Deseret Peak, dealing with the combining of players from different schools, right? A brand new program, a spotlight in some regards. It's an uphill battle for sure, right? And there's no culture there anyway, so they're building it from the ground up. There's likely to be ups and downs. You don't have the 4-year starters or 4-year experience of players that can lead your team through tough times, right? I think 500 on the season for them would be an amazing way to start, and that we should really be looking at what Deseret Peak looks like 2 years from now. But if they can hit 500 on the season as an opening program, I really think that that's a positive. I really do. So in a lot of ways, I'm challenging these teams to prove me wrong. I would love for that. I want you all to see success. I really do. So go out there this year and make people pay attention, show them what you can do, and strive for that. I think you'll see success. I really do. So good luck, everyone, as you head towards this new season. I cannot wait to see what you guys all do. I'm super excited for it. I hope everybody else is excited for it as well. I know this was a lengthy episode, but I felt like we had a lot to cover. So coming up in, I don't know, when I get to it, but probably in the next couple days or something, we've got ladies soccer that we've got to get introduced, right? We didn't cover that last year. We want to try to do some of that this year. We've also got ladies volleyball coming up this fall. And in fact, I think both those, if I remember right off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure both those sports actually even start before football, okay? But I obviously don't know enough about them, so that one doesn't require as in-depth research on my part just yet, okay? But so those ones will be coming up as we gear towards dwindling down some of this dead time, right, where there's not a lot going on. I mean, I know there's still teams doing like summer sports and stuff. I saw a kid in a baseball get up earlier today. So like I know there's still things going on, but I think I'm going to burn myself out if I try to cover all that kind of stuff too. So I'm just sticking to the main seasons. So please don't take that personally if you did. But those are the two sports that we still got to get going up for this coming season, right? So I hope everybody enjoyed this. Again, I know it was lengthy. Saved by His Blood Clothing, thank you for joining us in the chat. That tells me that everything's working right, and that you can at least probably hear me. So thank you for that. I hope everybody has a great day. I hope everybody had a great 4th of July, that you came back with all 11 fingers and toes and everything was good. So thank you for listening. It's been a pleasure of mine. As always, guys, please take care of yourself. Please take care of each other. Until next time, I'll see you at the games.